my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm the author of the young adult fantasy Firian Rising, and this is English Nerd. So for today's video, I thought it would be helpful for some of you to have a kind of literary term starter kit. If you're not sure where to begin, or you're signed up for AP or something like that, and you're really not sure what terms mean or where to start, these are some basic terms that every serious English student should know. So in no particular order, I'm just going to begin. Okay, number one of these 10 terms is diction. Diction is just a fancy word for word choice. So if you choose to say pretty instead of handsome, if you choose to say golden instead of yellow, those are diction choices. So diction just means word choice, which is almost always intentional, certainly on the part of great authors. After that, term number 2 is syntax. Syntax is essentially word order. It's the way that you put sentences and phrases and words all together. So, syntax has to do with sentence length and the order of words. So Yoda, for instance, would use very unorthodox syntax because he puts his words in an unusual order. Okay, number 3 is imagery. People tend to use the word imagery to mean a whole lot of different things that aren't actually imagery. So technically speaking, imagery is just sensory description. So visual imagery would be visual kinds of description. There's also auditory imagery, all the senses, as long as it has to do with sense description specifically, not just describing what exists, but really engages the senses, that would be imagery. Number 4 rather, is hyperbole. Hyperbole is one of the first upper level terms that a lot of people learn. Hyperbole is just extreme exaggeration. That's all. It's just extreme exaggeration. After that, we have juxtaposition. Juxtaposition is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of other terms as well. But juxtaposition at its core is basically putting two incongruous things right next to each other. So you could juxtapose an image of happiness with an image of sadness. So the writer of Beowulf does this a lot. There's a ton of juxtaposition of creation and destruction. In the beginning of A Tale of Two Cities, I'm doing the Tale of Two Cities series right now. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. We have the juxtaposition of those two ideas. So it's things that don't really go together that are placed, smashed right up against each other to make us think differently. So that's juxtaposition. After that we have connotation. Connotation is the next one. Connotation is a super important term to know. It is the definition of a word beyond the dictionary definition. So it's all of the associations that you have with it. It's all of the kind of cultural baggage that comes with it. Does it feel positive or negative? Sometimes that doesn't reflect in the dictionary definition, but we know what the difference in meaning is. So it's that meaning beyond the dictionary definition of a word. Connotation is enormously important when you're talking about literary analysis or anything else like that. Okay, after that we have tone. Tone is you can think of it almost like tone of voice. So if I say something in a particular tone of voice, then you generally can tell if I'm happy or if I'm mocking it or if I'm angry or if I'm jaded, whatever the tone is. So tone is that, but instead it's translated into writing. So maybe the tone is bitter because the narrator is bitter. Maybe the tone is optimistic because the narrator is optimistic. So it's basically whatever attitude the narrator seems to have toward its subject. That's the tone of the piece. It's really closely connected to the idea of mood, but mood is more of the audience's response. How do they feel about something? Maybe they feel that the scene is creepy. That could line up with the tone, but it doesn't necessarily. So mood talks more about the audience and tone talks more about the writer or the narrator of the piece. Okay, after that we have satire. Satire is a complete genre of literature, or something can just, an element of a work can be satirical. Satire is mocking something in order to inspire change. That in order to inspire change is a really important aspect of satire. It distinguishes it from parody, for instance. So you can write a parody, like Bored of the Rings by the Harvard Lampoon, and you're just making fun of something. You don't intend to inspire any sort of change, you're just making fun of it for the sake of making fun of it. But a satire makes fun of something in order to inspire some change. So, for instance, Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal is one of the most famous satires in certainly the last few hundred years. And it was meant to mock and shock people in order to inspire the English to treat the Irish more humanely. And so there are actual suggestions kind of embedded in the satire that are meant to inspire change. Okay, next one is another entire genre of literature, and that is allegory. And kind of like satire, it is its own genre, but there can be elements of satire or elements of allegory in a work that is otherwise characterized as something else. So an allegory is a narrative that is also an extended metaphor. So what that means is basically it's a story, but each element or several elements represent something else. So it works on two levels. There's the literal level, and then there's a level that is different. So an allegory could be like the medieval play Everyman. Everyman is approached by Death, the character, who tells him he needs to go on a journey and he needs to bring a reckoning of all of his deeds to God. He can't delay the journey, but he is allowed to bring a friend if he's able to find anybody who's willing to go with him. So Everyman goes to Fellowship, who represents his friends, and then he goes to Kindred and Cousin, representing his family, and then he goes to Goods, representing his stuff, and everything refuses to go with him because, of course, the journey represents his own death. And then finally, Good Deeds agrees to go with Everyman and help him to make his reckoning of all of his deeds before God. So obviously there's a moral there, but allegories don't need to have a moral. Often they do. The point is that it's a story that works on multiple levels. So story, narrative, that's also an extended metaphor. And then finally, the last one I had on my kind of starter pack list is an oxymoron. An oxymoron is when it's like a type of juxtaposition, basically. Except an oxymoron is just words that have opposite or contrasting meanings that are put right next to each other. So instead of being more idea-based, like a lot of juxtaposition, instead it's words put together. So this can be jumbo shrimp, old news, frozen fire, loud silence, that kind of thing. So it's just words put next to each other that are contrasting to make a larger point. So this is by no means all of the literary terms that are helpful to know if you're doing analysis, but it's a great place to begin. If you know these, then you can go on to others. I know I have done videos on metaphors and similes, on allusions, on alliteration, on some different things. So if you want to check those out, feel free to explore the rest of this channel. Like this video if you like it, and I will see you on Monday. Bye.